Right, okay. What is a Scrum of Scrums and why is it effective? I'm going to come back to that second half. So a Scrum of Scrums originally came about in the 90s. It's an old idea, and really it's a very simple one. We have a daily Scrum. The team come together, particularly the developers, and work out what they need to do to achieve the goal that they've set themselves. In the early days, we weren't talking too much about goals. We were talking about the work to be done. Are we working on the most important thing? How do we rejig ourselves to be working on the most important thing so that we ensure that we have a happy customer at the end of this sprint? Daily Scrum. Well, when you've got multiple teams, what do? Well, why not have a Scrum as a result of those daily Scrums? Scrum of Scrums. Well, that's what we did. Was we took representatives from each team and sent them to all stand in a slightly different place very often and have a chat about what their team was doing, how it was going, what problems they were finding, what changes they were doing. They were doing a daily Scrum, but across many teams. Okay? So the developers, often the developers who were best placed to talk for that team, it wasn't a lead developer, it certainly wasn't the ScrumMaster. It was the person who maybe had the issue and needed to talk it out with the wider group, or they were going to make a change that they knew was going to impact other people and they wanted to, put a face to the pain that was coming everybody's way. They would step up, they would attend on behalf of the whole team and represent them in a conversation of equals with the teams. So the idea was really to rapidly move information across multiple teams. On the face of it, very, very good idea. And it works really quite well. Okay, it's not the best pattern out there, but it is a good, solid pattern when executed with some elegance. Now, that's not my most common experience of a daily Scrum. If I'm going to be kind, what I see is the Scrum Masters get together and talk about what their teams talked about in the daily Scrum. Well, okay, there's likely issues happening in all three teams and those people need to have that chat. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it's not the daily Scrum. That's an issues meeting. If you've come from the program management world, project management world, you might have heard of risks and issues meeting. We're really tipping into that world there. Good thing, not a daily Scrum. Okay. Or we see the project managers appear and they do have a risks and issues meeting and they call it a daily Scrum and it doesn't take 15 minutes and you know the drill. I'm sure you've been in a daily Scrum that is only one in name. It's pretty much the same thing, but big. So the problem is not the construct of the daily Scrum, the Scrum of Scrums. It's not the idea. It's very often it's brought into organisations who don't yet understand the purpose of a Scrum and can't conceive of a world where developers between teams talk to each other to solve problems themselves, away from management, away from leaders, away from the supposed experts. Okay. And as such, they create a way of managing that communication. They call it a Scrum of Scrums because they've come across this idea and it kind of fits. It's that name flip that we see all the time. So, is it effective? When it's done well, yeah, it's not bad. Okay, the idea is that, say, you've got three teams and they can all have their daily Scrum at the same time because the Scrum Master doesn't need to be in all of those meetings at the same time. In 15 minutes, representatives from all three of those teams come together and they have a quick chat, another 15 minutes. So in 30 minutes, your team has updated its plan. It's found a new way of tackling whatever issues have arisen in the last 24 hours. They have a way forward. And they've gone ahead and they've communicated with the other two teams that they work with, okay, to ensure that they're aware of the issues of the change of plan and they've heard the adjustments those other two teams. So now they're in a good place. They know which teams they need to talk to urgently, which teams they can put on the back burner a bit, okay, which issues have to be dealt with. That's good. Okay, so in 30 minutes, we've got that. And you will come across Scrum of Scrums, and it gets silly. So maybe in 45 minutes, we've come across a very big span, and we've got that information back into the teams because representatives have done it. Now, you can do that. if we ignore that thing where Scrum Masters get together and safe is terrible for this thing, where, oh, I don't know if it's safe or it's the implementations of safe that I've seen and heard about, where essentially the Scrum Masters come together with this thing called an RTE, a release train engineer, and they have a chat about stuff. Great meeting, not what we're meant to be doing. All those PMs come together, they have a risks and issues meeting, they probably get some status updates because they like a good status update. We'll ignore those. We've got a well-working Scrum of Scrums. We've got a great daily Scrum that feeds into a great Scrum of Scrums. We've got 3 teams. Do they need to do that every day? Do they need to do that at all? What's the purpose? The purpose is actually quite simple. It's to broadcast that information. This team is having this issue. This team is making these changes. This team is making these changes. This team is, let's pretend it's going well. It's not actually having an issue. It doesn't need to make change. It's on track. They're the lucky ones. They're not my team, in my experience. Are there other ways we could create that information flow? Well, yeah. If we've got teams A, B and C, why don't members from teams B and C trot off to team A? And vice versa. Team A has people in B and C for their daily scrums. We've done the same thing. It's 15 minutes. Okay. Why don't we make it an asynchronous thing where people update their information on a common channel? Why don't we just create a communication pathway between all those 3 teams where they can just talk about it? They don't need to wait for some special meeting, be it the daily scrum or a scrum of scrums, to say, you know what, we need to make a change over here. We probably need to let you know about that because we're going to trip you up. Wouldn't it be great if, instead of having a meeting, they just thought, I need to go and talk to John because I said I was going to do this and I'm not anymore. And they felt like that was a good answer, that they could just pick up the phone, just walk across the floor and say, John, I'm about to make your life slightly harder, but it's for a good reason. Let's work this through. For me, that's effective. That is really what we want, is to give the power to the people who have the information for them to work it out. Please keep the daily scrums. They're a good meeting. Keep your scrum of scrums if they're working well, if they're serving their purpose. But I would also, and I would hugely encourage you to say, you know what? Why isn't this just a fallback? Why aren't we able to turn around and say, we don't need that scrum of scrums? We know. We've already had that discussion. Those 2 teams really needed a chat and they did it just before the end of yesterday. They're good. They know what they're doing. They've updated their plan together. You know, Team C, God love them. It's going well. They didn't need to make any changes. They weren't involved in that. But they know it's happening. They've been informed. Okay? As a natural byproduct of the work, not by putting something in everybody's calendar. If you've got to this point in the video, I hope you've enjoyed it. If so, a like would be appreciated. If you want to hear more from me, more answers to questions that maybe you've got in the Agile world, please subscribe to the channel. And if you've got a question that you really want answered, drop it in the comments. I promise we'll get around to it. Thank you.